So, there's one more thing to talk about. Dream of the Red Chamber actually has 5 different titles. The one we use most commonly is Dream of the Red Chamber. Apart from that, there's also The Stone Chronicles, a guidebook for romance, and The 12 Beauties of Jinling. Let's focus on the guidebook. There's a storyline in the book about a guy named Jia Rui. Who's he? Well, he's from the Jia family, a branch of the big Jia family that's kind of gone downhill. Jia Rui lives with his grandpa. The Jia family still supports him and lets him work as a tutor in the private school of the Jia family, which we might call a tutor or senior today. One time, Jia Rui saw Wang Xifeng in the Jia residence and was totally taken by her beauty. He was smitten and got the idea to try and charm Wang Xifeng. How could Wang Xifeng take him seriously? If she looked down on him, that would be one thing, right? She could just ignore him. But she went out of her way to tease him. What's that called? She set up a trap of unrequited love. She made an appointment with him to meet at a certain place at night, right? Jia Rui happily went to the meeting, right? But Sister Feng had arranged everything, right? So, she locked him in a long alley, with both ends of the alley closed off, right? He froze the whole night in the winter. This was the first time she teased him. The second time, she teased him even more severely, sending Jia Rui and another person to pour dung on his head, and then forced him to write how much money he owed, right? After being teased twice, he fell ill, very seriously ill, lying on the sickbed unable to get up. All kinds of medicine were tried, even ginseng, but it was of no use, and he was close to death. Oh man, at that moment, this sneaky monk shows up. He hands Jia Rui a mirror called the Mirror of Love and Beauty and tells him it can only reflect the reverse side, not the front. So, Jia Rui, lying on his sickbed, checks out the reverse side. And bam! He's shocked by what he sees, a creepy and scary skeleton. He gets scared and then curses angrily, "This monk is trying to scare me to death." But then he's like, "You know what? He said not to look at the front, but I gotta see what's there." So he flips it over, and what does he see? The lovely and beautiful Wang Xifeng waving at him, and before he knows it, he's following her inside. After going in and out a few times, he kicks the bucket. The mirror is called the Mirror of Love and Beauty, and it is also inferred if the book title A guidebook is used. There is a significant reminder and profound implication in it, just like in Dream of the Red Chamber. You shouldn't just look at its front side, but also its reverse side, which shows a skeleton that can scare you to sweat, right? If it really scares you to sweat, then there is hope, but he insists on looking at the front side. When I think back to my younger days, probably when I was in 6th grade, the first time I read Dream of the Red Chamber, after finishing it, I had only one thought: how awesome it would be to be like Jia Baoyu, haha. Living in a place of luxury and kindness, with an old lady looking after and spoiling me, and a bunch of maids and sisters around, it would be so lively and exciting, reciting poetry and drinking wine all day long. Wouldn't it be great to be Baoyu? This is what I call looking at the bright side. Looking at the bright side is just looking at the good stuff. Hey, when we look at our Chinese culture, it's been so amazing over the past thousands of years. How fantastic! When you read Dream, you'll feel a deep sense of pride in our own national culture. Look at the poetry, music, chess, architecture, clothing, and cuisine in it. You can see how intricate, wonderful, and dazzling our culture is, right? Hey, reading it this way is just looking at the bright side. However, Cao Shuoqin really got that our country is in a tough spot. Don't be fooled by the fancy Jia family. What's really going on behind the scenes? Some shady and scary power struggles. Like Mr. Lu Sun said, the gloomy mist is all over the place, but only a few get it. Baoyu, in such a rich family, is surrounded by this dark mist, the harsh and cruel fights between people. Only one person really gets it, and that's Baoyu. It's really tough. So, this is a heads up to readers that when you read Dream of the Red Chamber, you gotta dig into its darker side, its big tragedy. You can't just look at the good stuff. If our country really faces up to its own tragedy, it might be a real wake-up call, like suddenly getting better from a bad illness. It's totally possible. This is the last chance, right? So, there it is, all depending on how you read it. Chairman Mao was right on this point, although he was talking about political struggle. In fact, the infighting is really fierce. The two parties, Mrs. Wang and Mrs. Xing, fought fiercely and cruelly. On the surface, they are all gentle and refined, but in fact, they all lead to death. How many people have died? Think about it. King Wen is dead, isn't she? Siki is dead, Sister Yu is dead. Let's think about how many people have died. Yuanyang almost committed suicide, right? Later on, she realized that Jia's mother couldn't do without her, so she didn't die. However, as soon as Jia's mother left, she also committed suicide. Qin Keqing, did she really hang herself like that? It's because she was involved with her father-in-law, which they call scraping the ashes. Hey, between a father-in-law and daughter-in-law, right? This matter was exposed. Who found out? Two maids, Qin Keqing's close maids, one named Baozu and the other named Ruizu. After they found out, that was the first thing. Another thing is that Qin Keqing's hairpin was left by Jia Yucun's pillow, who is her father-in-law. Isn't her own husband Jia Rui? Jia Rui's father is Jia Yucun. So Jia Yucun's wife's name is Yushi. Once, she saw a hairpin left by her pillow. What did she realize? She knew whose hairpin it was. After the truth came out, Qin Keqing couldn't bear to live in the Ning Palace, so she took her own life. After her suicide, both maids knew they had no future. Jia Yucun would surely silence them. One maid, when Qin Keqing passed away, she followed and killed herself by bumping into a pillar. Another maid, who was smarter, said, Qin Keqing doesn't have any children, right? Since I haven't had a child, I'll be her adopted daughter. I'll be a descendant during the funeral, specially responsible for mourning. Hey, Jia Yucun was also very pleased, so this person survived. The whole Jia mansion is like this, with the so-called gloomy pall overhangs the flowers and trees, as well as Jin Chuaner's suicide and so on. So the title, A Guidebook for Romance, serves as a reminder for readers to look at the darker side of things. We just introduced the origin of Dream of the Red Chamber, and the historical stages of readology, as well as the mystery of dream. Now we are moving on to the second lecture. I just mentioned that within the multiple structures of dream there is a structure called the social realism structure, which is mainly reflected in the narrative of dream. There is not a single idle word in the entire book of Dream, and the transitional paragraphs written for the needs of the plot are often used to reveal the intricacies of Chinese society. Now let's see a few examples. In the fourth chapter of Dream of the Red Chamber, the title is Ill Fate. Ill-fated girl meets ill-fated boy, the monk passes a hasty judgment on the case of the gourd. It's a really interesting story. Originally, it was meant to explain how the Shui family made their way to the capital, and this chapter was written to set the stage for that. It mainly focuses on the character of Jia Yucun. Jia Yucun and Jia Baoyu are the first two characters to appear in the whole dream, and their names sound similar, right? Zhen Shiyin means to hide the facts, while Jia Yucun means to speak deceptively in the local dialect. That's how these two names came about. So, to really get what's going on in the fourth chapter, we need to talk about some of the stuff that happened with these two characters before. In Suzhou, Zhen Shiyin was a big shot, loaded with cash, and a real bigwig in the area. Right next to his place was this little temple called the Gourd Temple, which was practically part of his property. Inside the temple, there was this broke scholar named Jia Yucun, who wasn't a monk. His family had fallen on hard times, so he had no place to crash and ended up holing up in the Gourd Temple. After Zhen Shiyin got to know him, he really took a shine to Jia Yucun, seeing him as a smart and talented scholar, and held him in high esteem. One year during the Mid-Autumn Festival, Zhen Shiyin set up some booze and invited Jia Yucun over to his place to drink and check out the moon. After a few drinks, Jia Yucun got all inspired and whipped up a poem on the spot. When Zhen Shiyin heard it, he said it showed signs of future success and asked why a smart guy like Jia Yucun wasn't taking the imperial examination in the capital. Jia Yucun said he wanted to take the exam, but he was strapped for cash, couldn't even afford basic living expenses. That's when Zhen Shiyin spilled the beans that he'd been thinking of helping out Jia Yucun for a while, but was hesitant to bring it up for fear of being misunderstood. He then told his servant to rustle up 50 taels of silver and 2 sets of winter clothes, which he handed over to Jia Yucun. Jia Yucun took the gifts with a humble "thank you" and kept on drinking. The next day, Zhen Shiyin got the drinks ready and wanted to invite Jia Yucun over again, but the monk from the Gourd Temple told Zhen Shiyin that Jia Yucun had taken off early in the morning, leaving a note that said, "Scholars don't wait for the stars to align, they go when they need to. It's all about sticking to your principles." It was clear that Jia Yucun was really chuffed after getting Zhen Shiyin's cash, so he jumped at the chance to hightail it to the capital for the imperial exam. And what do you know, he aced it. After passing the exam, the 50 taels of silver came in handy for more than just living expenses. With plenty left over, he could use it to grease some palms, to secure a better official position. That 50 taels of silver changed his whole fate. First off, it got him to the capital in a flash for the exam, and then it helped him land a sweet official gig through a little backdoor dealing. After getting into office, he quickly showed his true colors, greedy and mean. His colleagues started giving him the side eye, and eventually, they got the chance to snitch on him, leading to Jia Yucun getting the boot from his job. But hey, getting the boot didn't faze Jia Yucun much. He had already made a pretty penny during his time in office. A few years in that gig and you're set for life, right? So, he sorted out his family and started living the good life. And guess who came knocking? It was Lin Ruhai. Now, Lin Ruhai was Lin Dayu's old man. His missus, who was also Dayu's mom, had passed away early on. After that, Lin Ruhai raised his daughter all on his lonesome. He was a middle-aged father with a young daughter, and he doted on her. That's why he asked Jia Yucun to come over and be Dayu's private tutor. So, he started teaching Dayu all about books and stuff. Dayu was smart as a whip, but she was also kind of frail, needing more meds than meals. She wasn't the most studious either, taking breaks from her studies now and then. So, Jia Yucun didn't have to work too hard either. He was living the easy life. Later on, Lin Ruhai started feeling old and realized he couldn't take care of his daughter properly, so he decided it would be best to send her to her grandma's place. After this decision, Jia Yucun had to be let go. Jia Yucun saw this as an opportunity to ask Lin Ruhai to help him get his old job back. Lin Ruhai was like Jia Zheng's brother-in-law, and Jia Zheng, Baoyu's dad, was a big shot in the government. Plus, Wang Xifeng, from the Wang family of Wang Xifeng, the in-laws, was also a high-ranking official. So, he used the influence of the Jia and Wang families to help Jia Yucun get back into the government. Where did he end up working? He became the magistrate of Yingtian Prefecture. So, here's the thing, after Jia Yucun got that gift from Zhen Shiyin and went off to the capital for the imperial exam, Zhen Shiyin himself had two major disasters. First off, during the Lantern Festival that year, Zhen Shiyin sent his male servant to take his daughter, Ying Lian, to see the lanterns. Now, Ying Lian was a precious one, because Zhen Shiyin and his wife had only managed to have a daughter in their middle age, and they doted on her like anything. But wouldn't you know it, during the Lantern Festival, the crowd was so thick that they got separated. And after getting lost, the male servant got spooked and didn't have the guts to go back, so he took off. Zhen Shiyin searched high and low for his daughter but couldn't find her, and the couple was heartbroken. That was the first disaster. Then, he ran into another disaster. It was during the Chinese New Year, on New Year's Eve, when they were cooking in the temple, and oops, the place caught fire. And let me tell you, it was a big deal, 'cause the temple and Zhen Shiyin's house were all connected, and most of Zhen Shiyin's place got burned down, and the whole street was lit up. The military and the locals came to put out the fire, and they finally managed to do it, but Zhen Shiyin had lost everything and had to take his wife to stay with his father-in-law. And when his father-in-law saw his son-in-law in such a sorry state, he felt uneasy and often spoke harshly to him. So, his father-in-law's name was Fengsu. That's just how things are in Chinese tradition. And those were the two disasters he faced. Later on, Zhen Shiyin's health went downhill, and he was hobbling around with a cane, looking like he was on his last legs. Then, one day, a monk and a Taoist strolled into the street, singing this catchy little ditty. Folks all say that immortals are great, but they can't forget their sweethearts. Folks all say that something's awesome, but they can't get it out of their heads. They kept on with this pattern of phrases, and Zhen Shiyin overheard it and caught up with them, asking, "What's that song you're singing?" All I caught were the words, "good" and "done." The monk and the Taoist nodded and said, "You got it right. In this world, if something ain't good, then it ain't done, and if it ain't done, then it ain't good. When it's good, then it's done." The guys from Suzhou were a bit of a deep thinker. Since we're in Suzhou today, how do the locals say? When a cup's about to fall, what do they say? Catch it, try catch it again, try. If you can't catch it the first time, it's not good. Did you catch it in time? Nope, it fell and smashed. Then it's no good trying again, that's how it goes. Catch it again? Then it's no good. That's it. In this world, if something ain't good, i.e. it ain't done, and if it ain't done, then it ain't good trying again. When it's good, then it's done the first time, and when it's done the first time, it's good. So, when Zhen Shiyin heard the song, he was like, "Whoa, this guy's got some serious wisdom, man." That's a Buddhist concept, right? They say our wisdom comes from past lives. Zhen Shiyin, he's one of those wise dudes. After hearing the song, he was like, "Let me break it down for you." Then he busted out this verse: "In a plain old room, all quiet and still, once I had a busy desk." And there's this line that everyone probably remembers: "In the midst of all the chaos, you finish your tune, and I step up, claiming a foreign land as my homeland." In the end, it's all about making wedding clothes for others. He sang this verse, and then he just followed a monk and a Taoist, basically becoming a monk and causing a stir on the street. That's how things turned out for Zhen Shiyin eventually. And let me tell you, his outcome was no ordinary one. He achieved enlightenment and became an immortal, reaching the ultimate goal of cultivation.